To the second day of the Center for Racial Justice Summer Institute. And I just want to say, my goodness, for those of you who were here yesterday, wasn't that such an incredible opening session? I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. And so, really, the reason why we are converging here around the topic and the organizing goal of localizing ethnic studies is we want to build up community wisdom and community power and to commit ourselves to really transforming the education locally. And so yesterday we had a truly amazing conversation with Vicky Wong, Lillian Fabros, Adna Louie, who are they're colloquially known as the Three Musketeers. And we really delved into the fact that the Third World Liberation Front strike has local roots in terms of amazing organizing that these three women did as youth in Salinas. This is a history that should be part of an ethnic studies curriculum in our local area. And so, another thing that I want to say about this, our sessions today, for those of you who have been part of this struggle, you need no introduction to it. We have been in the thick of it here in terms of fighting for ethnic studies. I always say this, it's one of my pet phrases, but ethnic studies, it's not ethnic studies if there isn't a struggle. And that was true over 50 years ago, and it's true today. And in our local area, we know about what's happening in South County, but it's also true with North County. There's been a kind of overall suspension of the realization of ethnic studies in community accountable ways. And so for those of us who have been fighting against the reactionary power of a few that have prevailed thus far within our local area, we knew that we had to be in conversation with people, with movers and shakers, with visionaries in other areas with similarities to Santa Cruz. And so initially, we envisioned this as being a conversation with people from three different areas: Coachella, Oxnard, as well as Stockton. And so we hoped that people who had developed really amazing, mind blowing ethnic studies curricula could come and share something of their struggle to develop this. Unfortunately, the people that we invited from Stockton and Oxnard were not able to make it, but we are so deeply fortunate to have someone who co-created and co-founded ethnic studies in Coachella. We have here today as our guest Alfonso Tabouda. And Alfonso Tabouda was born and raised in Coachella. And in the 1990s, he joined Mecha and became politically active in helping empower his community. And like some of the people here too, comes from an intergenerational legacy that involves the Brown Berets. He became involved in organizing students throughout the Coachella Valley against a range of infamous propositions. Proposition 187, which was anti-immigration, 209, which is anti-affirmative action, and 207, which mandated an English-only education. He went to UCR, where he received his degree in anthropology, and there he organized a coalition of students, organizations, community members for a Latina chancellor. After graduating, he started working in the eastern Coachella Valley on a research project that looked into farm workers' colonials. I would love to hear more about that. I really would. During this time, he really found, and what sparked in him was a desire to teach. So he came from community struggle with a desire to ground that in public education. This is when he returned to school. He received his Master's of Education teaching credential at Claremont Graduate School. And he's taught for Coachella Valley Unified School District for almost 20 years. He co founded ethnic studies at CVUSD. And so it's in the spirit of learning from people. And I mentioned yesterday that at Coachella, they have 14 ethnic studies courses on the books. That is so triumphant. I mean, it's mind blowing. That attests to years and decades of organizing. And at this point, too, they're developing courses, ethnic studies courses in the arts. They're also developing ethnic studies courses in the sciences. I mean, watch out. Like if the basis of ethnic studies really compels people in different fields not to simply think like, oh, I'm teaching this class on biology. I'm just going to throw in some scientists of color. If that's the be all end all of what you think ethnic studies is, you're sorely mistaken. Instead, ethnic studies is a commitment to justice and transformation. And so you will be asking a question that Vicky Wong was posing yesterday, which is who are the sources of authority in this class? Where does that knowledge come from? Was it implicated in racial and colonial violence? Have there been people's movements to resist these forms of knowledge, forms of authority and control? Are there other ways of understanding science? And so it's really like, ethnic studies is interdisciplinary and it's rooted in a commitment to justice and it's rooted in accountability to the communities that we must be serving. And, we have a guest who has been leading the way doing all of that. And so please join me in giving a hearty welcome to Alfonso.
So real quick, I'm Alfonso Tabouda. I am from the Coachella Valley. I was born and raised out there. One of my first memories is where I'm gonna sort of use the mic, sort of use my voice. Uh, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll pull it off. Okay. So my dad's compadres make fun of me and joke around about how I became an activist. And his comadre says it was because she used to take us to the UFW strikes. And I thought they were just parties. We would go walk around, flags everywhere, and then we would have lunch. Usually birria, pozole, great times. A lot of kids running around having a good time. But now I look back and I'm like, wow, I was doing all this stuff. At the same time, my Nino, my Nina were also involved. My Nino pulled my dad into the Brown Berets. And I remember when I was not going to graduate high school, my dad sort of beat me up a little bit. Said, do something with your life. Join the Brown Berets. And I was like, what the heck is that? Go to a COD, which is our junior college. So I ended up going to COD, and that's where I walked in the door and Mecha felt like home, right? Because in those days, yes, we read what we would consider like multicultural lit. And the only story I remember was written by Paderes, which was the movie Cortez, right? A man with his pistol or something like that. But it was talking about Gregorio Cortez. That was the only story I really got it connected to. I mean, there's a couple others that I remember because I connected them to like my sister. She, the one in the middle, is a green kangaroo. That was in third grade. But nevertheless, I always loved to read. I always liked to write. I'm not a great writer though. But nevertheless, walking into that meeting, listening to other young people talking about doing things changed my life, right? And I joke around and say Mecha did save my life. In a way, it did, because by going to that meeting and talking to the individuals, I was not with my friends who ended up going to prison, right? So there's a huge, that's a different story for another time, but nevertheless, that's what changed my mind. And then right afterwards, Proposition 187 started coming out, and that made me rethink, even though I was born in the US, what about my aunts, my uncles, my cousins who were undocumented? Giving them a ride would be against the law. Helping them, housing them would be against the law. Even educating them would be against the law. So I became an activist. Not only that, but I was on a 2-week blockade for the Torres Martinez Cahuilla or Desert Cahuilla band during a time in the 90s in 94 where they were doing dumping of human waste on the reservation. That was a very interesting, transformative time for myself as well. Myself and my sister. If it wasn't for her, she calls me her twin, but we're really about 11 months apart. So, nevertheless, with that, I started thinking about my position and my reality. And not until my graduate school did I realize that this story was, or this beginning, her Sandra Cisneros little chapter on Mi Nombre was really important for us. And I open up all my classes every year with this story. I do it bilingually, English and Spanish. If you'd like to take the QR code, it's actually the form itself, and so that you could read it to yourself. So I'm going to read it out loud. In English, my name means hope. In Spanish, it means too many letters. It means sadness. It means waiting. It is the it is like the number 9, a muddy color. It is Mexican records that my father played on Sunday mornings when he was shaving. Songs like Sobbing. It was my great grandmother's name, and now it's mine. She was a horse of a woman too, born like me in the Chinese year of the horse, which is supposed to be bad luck if you're born female. But I think this is a Chinese lie because the Chinese, like the Mexicans, don't like their women strong. My great grandmother, I would have liked to have known her. A wild horse of a woman, so wild that she wouldn't marry until my great grandfather threw a sack over her head and carried her off, just like that, as if she was a fancy chandelier. That's the way he did it. The story goes, she never forgave him. She looked out the window all her life, the way so many women sit their sadness on their elbow or on an elbow. I wonder if she made the best with what she got, or with was she sorry because she couldn't be all the things that she wanted to be. Esperanza. I have inherited her name, but I do not want to inherit her place in the window. At school, they say her name funny, as if the syllables were made out of tin and hurt the roof of her mouth. But in Spanish, it is made out of made out of a softer something, like silver, quiet and thick. Sister's name, Magdalena, which is uglier than mine. Magdalena, who at least can come home and become Nene, but I am always Esperanza. And this is the part that I think is the most powerful line. I would baptize myself under a new name, a name more like the real me, the one nobody sees, Esperanza as Lysandra or Maritza or Ceci, the ex. Yes, Ceci the X will do. And gives me a chance to talk about history, names, and who we are and what we bring into our generational understanding of why we're sitting in this room, why we're sitting in our classrooms, who we are, because we have to rethink the reason why we're here is because of those generational struggles. So I have the kids interview each other, they talk to each other. This is some of the simple questions that they go through. It gets a little bit more complex. I also ask them what they want to do in 5, 10 years so they can start thinking about what it is and who they are and why they're in my classroom. So, again, getting back to that, I started teaching at Desert Mirage High School in Thermal, which is an unincorporated area in Riverside County. And in this area, it's 98% Latino. Most of the farm people that go to and attend the school are farm workers or children of farm workers because many of the young men and young ladies work during the summer in the fields. Now, with that and understanding that, we're about 2 hours southeast from LA and about 2 hours northeast from San Diego. And there's this big mountain. So, this big mountain is the reason why we're the desert. Um, it's hot. I was sharing that when we left, it was about 113, 114. Last week, it went up to 124. But it's okay, guys. Just don't go running after 105. 100 degrees is okay, 105 is okay, but after that, it's too much. Our main industry is agriculture, but our second major industry is tourism. So if you've ever heard of Coachella, the festival, it's almost a month long endeavor for us. But that's not the only thing. We also have tennis, golf. It's, oh my God, golf courses are everywhere. So a lot of our parents either work in agriculture or hospitality. And for example, when we start talking about our schools, our three school districts in the area are Palm Springs, which is the most western section of the valley, because the valley sort of runs long. In the middle is Desert Sands, and then finally us, Coachella Valley Unified School District. I would say Palm Springs is the most diverse community, then Desert Sands, which would be the most affluent, even though it has pockets of mainly Latinos in their school district. And then Coachella being predominantly Latino school district. So much of the people who live in these areas work in, for example, in Palm Springs, construction, hospitality, and resorts. Same thing with Desert Sands, whereas we have a mixed economy with our predominantly agriculture and hospitality and services. These are our numbers for our schools, right? The three districts, Riverside County, and then California's. Our high school graduation for CV is 82% in 2019, 2020. We had an uptick this last couple years, but it's still pretty much about the same. Our A through G requirements. And see, getting to the story is me and myself and my buddies, the another three musketeers out in Coachella, we uh we really wanted to focus on the A through G, right? Because we were brand new teachers, we were became avid trained, and our whole focus, the three of us, was to get our students to go to college, right? Once they're there, they can figure it out. Get your degree, you can do whatever you want afterwards. And believe me, we had a lot of different stories. So we started organizing around 2014, but prior to that, we all started at a new high school, which was opened in 2003 by our founding principal, Joe Ceja, who later on I found out also knew my godparents and everybody else because of organizing. He himself was a student organizer in the 70s. So he brought that activism to campus and he purposely hired people to help out in awakening that activism in students. So we started having parent educational meetings with them, and we still hadn't started talking about anything in ethnic studies, right? We did have Chicano studies on the books, and we did think about adding a couple other things because, for example, my compañero in arms majored in Chicano studies and Black studies from Santa Barbara, and he wanted to bring that into the mix. So we had those conversations, but we really didn't know how to write our curriculum or deal with or negotiate in the district level. But it was all the way up until 2014 where we were having great success with students. And then during that time from 2010 to 2014, we had about 5 principals. And a lot of it was because they were trying to take us off different tracks and different things. And in 2014, we were moved. About 10 teachers were moved from the high school. So that made us a little bit more organized and more wanting to take over. And at the same time, I'm going to say that our teachers union did not want to support us, right? So it was just us three and a couple other teachers from here and there that were having these conversations. So in about 2015, we started talking to each other and started thinking about how can we institute some of the things that we were doing in Avid with ethnic studies, critical thinking skills, and institutionalize it. So even if they move us out, they can't get rid of the curriculum. So that's when we started meeting with different grassroots organizations throughout our community. For example, Alianza, Raíces, and we had former students and colleagues that were working at those agencies now. So we had those meetings and we started talking, and then next thing we did was start proposing these ideas. And at the same time, statewide, it was the beginning of writing the bill for ethnic studies. So we would use that as leverage with the school board. And we kept pushing and saying, hey, this is going to happen. We're just waiting for the governor to sign, but it's going to happen. So we should start looking at how do we get it on board. We didn't get along with our superintendent. And one of the reasons why we got moved was we also we went to the school board and asked for a vote of no confidence. His biggest thing was iPads and iPads. I don't have a problem with iPads, but we didn't have to pay $10,000 for iPads. Oh, by the way, yeah, our school district went 100% Apple. Infrastructure, iPads. One of our math teachers did the breakdown of the budget. Ended up being that each iPad that a student had was about $10,000 after they paid for the bond, which was wild. As soon as we started telling that to people, they sort of got a little angry. And then they started supporting us, right? So by 2017 and 18, we had 4 courses that we wrote. And in these things, and this is the other thing that they did is to placate us so they wouldn't have to listen to us. They gave us space, right? And that's all we asked for was space. They told us that, for example, one of the secondary ed directors said, there's this table. Everybody wants to sit down at this table, but there's not enough room. We're going to give you the little kids' table. He was using the analogy. And you guys can talk about your stuff and organize, but there's really not a lot of space at the big boys table. But if you get it something good and going, we'll let you present to the table. We decided to take over the table. So, in this, let me go back. So we started running candidates for the school board that favored ethnic studies. We ended up getting 3 out of the 4 seats that leaned towards ethnic studies in the school board that year. And that was, hard work too. They did a lot of the works, the candidates. But nevertheless, as soon as they came in, the superintendent that stayed on ended up resigning because he didn't feel well. Health issues. But he's been going around California talking about how he brought, Wi-Fi to a rural community. Whatever. I'm still a little upset. I almost followed him around to go, you know, yell at him. But I decided I'm a bigger person. So, why ethnic studies? We believe that ethnic studies would open the minds just like it did for me and my buddies, right? My compañeros. It allowed us to see ourselves in the story. It allowed us to see ourselves in history, and it connected us to generations of struggles, resistance, and life. Because ultimately, we all want to live, right? We all want to be successful. We all want to have things to pass on to our children. So we chose ethnic studies and we started doing research and we started writing stuff and creating our curriculum. And I can say I wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, but my team helped us create all these things. And that time that they gave us was beneficial because we were able to rethink. And that was the biggest thing is we wanted to rethink education in general. And like Christine was sharing, we tried to go in every department and every course and rethink what it looked like. So we had this idea, right? And I think James Banks, even though I don't agree with that he writes, he talks about how ethnic studies has 4 levels. The first one is holidays, heroes. The next one, a little bit more stories. And we were stuck at that transitional approach where we, instead of just adding a unit here or a page there, because from the 90s to 2000s, people of color started getting maybe a page, maybe a paragraph in a textbook, but that wasn't enough. So we were pushing for level 3. We ended up creating a course that brought level 4, which is having the students think about transformative change. And that's our Y part project, right? And we're going to sort of talk about that later on, where they do a year-long study of an issue in their community. And then they present it to stakeholders from the state assemblyman, the mayor, the supervisor, or the county supervisor, and different agencies. And what they come up with is whatever they choose, they think the community needs. One of the biggest ones, I'm not going to lie, is school lunch. The second one is busing. Those are always the same two. And so for me, I'm like, we need to change school lunch and we need to fix busing. And they listen, but they've graduated and they're coming back now. And they're joining these nonprofit organizations. And they're pushing even more now because they have the facts. That's what I like. That's what gives me the chills, right? So we all know that ethnic studies increases student attendance, student engagement, their GPA boosts, high school graduations go up, high stakes standards test scores go up, and their college going rate goes higher. One of the biggest things is I also enjoy, which goes back to wrongly, level 4, engagement. I didn't know this, but One of the reasons why I continued on in college is because I was part of the student walkouts in 94 with 187. As a college student, I would talk to high school students and they're like, hey, we want to walk out. So for the desert, we had a mass walkout of the 5 high schools. And we all met up and protested the Koch brothers who showed up in Sun City, Palm Springs. And that was a cool display. And then we also walked down, which would be similar to not the boardwalk, but the stores in which we call El Paseo, downtown Palm Desert, where all the fancy shops. That sort of scared people. That was pretty fun though. Um, so for me, having students learn how to protest, which is in one of our lessons in Chicano studies and ethnic studies, is we do mock protests and we walk through the school. Most teachers, especially the newer ones, freak out because they hear the kids yelling, walk out, let's go. So it's part of our unit. I mean, and they organize posters, they do all this stuff. So they learn how to do the steps, right? Which is amazing because later on, when they do it on their own, I'm blown away. So let's get back to. So this is our vision for CVUSD is to engage students in critical, rigorous academic discourse that challenges representative hegemonic structures in order to examine their own standing in high globalized worlds so that they can build collective power and transform our community to become critical conscious and reimagine a more just world. So I like to tell kids how I do this is we're going to read a lot. We're going to write a lot. And then when we get tired, we're going to do some art projects, but then we're going to go back to reading and writing again and understanding what the text says. So we're very text heavy. And even though students may be from SPED all the way to GATE students, they learn to read and become critical readers and writers. These are our 4 tenets. Oh, I went the wrong way again. Sorry, this is the first time I'm presenting on my own. Ah, going the wrong way. Here we go. Self determination, humanization, community, and justice. These are our tenets for CVUSD. We want all our students to come out understanding and being connected to this. Now, we also went as far as to tell our board, our administrators, district, and site specific their roles in ethnic studies. So, for our board, we want them to become advocates, support, allocate funds. This is the biggest thing. Yesterday, I was sharing in California, the last couple of years, we had LCFF money. And if you're not in those meetings, you're not going to get funded. They're going to be like, this is great. This is amazing. We can't do it. We don't have money. So you have to be in those meetings. You have to somehow maneuver your way or get advocates because not only were we in those meetings, but so were the nonprofit organizations that we started with organizing with. So this was not a top down, this was a very much bottom up. And also create an oversight. One of the things that we realized is that we did not have curricular oversight in our district. It was just like a good old boy system. If they created the curriculum and looked great, they're like, it sounds good. Let's submit it. They would get paid for writing the curriculum, but nobody said it was good or bad. It was just now what we're going to teach. So that was one of the other things that we wanted. And one of the things that we created because of the committee. We created criteria of what ethnic study courses should have. And I'm going to share that with you later on. I forget. Oh, now, administrators district wide is to promote ethnic studies. That's another big thing. And what I found the last couple of years is they also need to be educated in ethnic studies because a lot of them say, this sounds amazing, this is great, but they have no clue what it is. And I'm going to move through these pretty fast. Steering committee. This is where I think the heart and soul of the ethnic studies is. So we have teachers from every school district, I mean, every school, high school that we have in our district, which would be a total of four. The two major big comprehensive high schools, the continuation school, and then a smaller one in a smaller community right outside in the right next to the Salton Sea. So if you don't know, we have the largest salt lake in the US, and it's has its own problems. But next to it is a little community. So in this, we develop curriculum, we talk about what we need, and we also have specialists in history, English, science, and we try to pull in every department from these schools to at least have a representative so we can start rethinking what ethnic studies and how these tenets that I showed represent in their or can be represented and taught in their courses. This is the other thing that the committee looks for: teacher training. And this is what I like to focus on is like, what do teachers need? I know that we took ethnic studies, but taking ethnic studies and majoring in ethnic studies is different than teaching ethnic studies. Because one of the funniest things that I found out first teaching Chicano studies was my biggest resistors in that class were the A students, the honor students, the AP students, because it went against everything they had learned, because they had learned to appease their teachers. They had learned to not question authority and to do their assignments. But all the homies loved the class and they actually would show up 2 or 3 times a day. And I would be like, don't you have another class? But I want to be here. So again, teaching ethnic studies is different than teaching other courses. So one of the things that we started implementing is a 3-day summer institute. It hasn't happened since COVID, but prior to that, we would have 3 days where we would present or bring presenters in. We would also have pullouts where we would try to bring in local professors to talk about ethnic studies and the different things that they needed. So, for example, one was the history of ethnic studies, which is usually the beginning of the school year, followed by all the social emotional. So, we have a young lady that teaches, I think, at San Francisco State, who has come down a couple times and talks about the social emotional need that teachers have after teaching some of this heavy stuff, because we do teach some heavy stuff. Um, then we also have throughout the year some PLC time, which is where we sit down and plan out units, talk about success, how the kids are writing, how they're doing the different things that they're doing, right? And that's where we sit down and talk. This is one of the, because our union is really heavy on PLCs or professional learning communities. We do have that time, but it's usually allotted to departments, right? So the history department meets, the English department meets, but we've sort of argued that ethnic studies as a whole, interdisciplinary, need to meet together as well. Now, this is for the principals and APs on at site and their responsibilities. One of the things is that they have to defend some of these teachers because we do get attacked, right? And they need to know who to assign to teach these courses as well. Because we've had individuals who were assigned to teach these courses that didn't really give a shit. That's the truth, right? One guy decided that he was teaching ethnic studies, he was going to teach Stoicism, right? And we had like, we were, why are you teaching that? I like the stuff, but that's not ethnic studies. He's not there any longer. So we have to also understand that they need to know who they have and the teacher capital on campus that can teach these courses. And if they don't have that, what trainings do they need? So that's the other thing. That's where admin really is critical, right? Because if they assign courses to be taught in ethnic studies and the teachers don't know the material, aren't familiar with the material, or uncomfortable to teach the material, we're not really helping the students. Oh, counselors. Counselors are really important because they promote the classes. They assign the students to the teachers. They get the kids excited before they walk in the door. Now, these are the roles of the teachers. They have to be effective and they have to be wanting to learn more about ethnic studies, right? It's not just learning about the Industrial Revolution, it's about all the other nitty gritty stuff that happened, right? These are the courses that we created and we're planning on creating. So we wrote our courses to meet UCOP or University of California Office of President's requirements for A through G courses. So we looked through, and there's a list that you can check out what courses are out there. And we started reading and trying to analyze. And this is what we were doing in the steering committee. How can we attach each of the A through G's with an ethnic studies course? Even though we can write one or create one, the hardest one that I was sharing earlier with my colleague over here is science. Even though, and this is funny, my daughter just graduated from UCR and she came back and she's working at a nonprofit. And her job is to talk about environmental justice, right? With a saltancy. And she started writing curriculum. But then when she presented it to some of the science teachers, they're like, well, we can't teach this. And she's like, why not? It's science. It has chemistry. It has biology. It has all these things, but it also has justice that's talking about how do we clean the Salton Sea? How do we make it livable for communities in that area? But nevertheless, that's the hardest nut to crack is our science department. This teatro, she's a new teacher, so we got a new theater teacher, so she's excited about that one. Now, how did we do this? We sort of talked about what we did, right? So we started organizing, talking to each other, trying to figure out what ethnic studies look like. We, who are our allies? Who are we willing to work with? And then we started having meetings. I'm not gonna lie, our biggest meetings were at bars and grills. We also enjoyed hanging out with each other. And then we started talking about what were the systems? Who was there? Who did we need to talk to? Who did we have to negotiate to start having these courses in our district? And also understanding the criteria, right? Like I said, we went through UCOP and made sure that each one was not just a class that the district approved, but was statewide approved, and the UCs were going to accept it for college bound students. That's the biggest thing, y'all. Ethnic studies is amazing, but making it a G course, and I know they're working on what was it, G, the next letter, I don't know, H course would be amazing, right? That's a H. H, yeah, as ethnic studies. And so that's the next stage is making it itself a requirement for all students. The next one is curriculum development. And this is what I was talking about is writing it so it met all the requirements. For example, one of my favorite classes to teach is race, gender, and class in US history. So everything that we talk about goes through that paradigm, that spectrum of ethnic studies. And yeah, they're learning history, but they're learning history with race, class, and gender as part of history, which is amazing, right? When kids walk out, they always check me because they're new words and new terms. And I guess I'm getting older. This is also the most important. This is where you use community networks to apply pressure to make it implemented. Because it's great to get it approved, have it go through, but now you have to make schools do it. Right. So you start organizing, sort of pushing them, having even parents call. And again, I forgot to say, because we were avid teachers and we were having great success with students going away to college, a lot of parents in the community were like, we got to listen to them. And when we were pushing for these classes to be approved, our biggest supporter was not the teachers union, but the classified union. They were like, why is this even a question? I remember we were in a meeting and they were like, should we fund this? Should we not fund this? And one of the bus drivers got up pissed off and said, why are we not funding this anyways? And from that point on, the conversation changed, right? Because even though the teachers didn't want to teach it, the community wanted it and they needed it. Oh, so yeah. So what I was thinking of doing right now is talking about organizing curriculum development and implementation. And I wanted to have groups to have these conversations because I know this is going to bleed into after lunch where we're going to talk more about what's going on in here locally. But I want to know what organizations are out here, what kind of curriculum would they like to be developed and implementation. Again, I'm a school teacher, so I like doing work. So, do we have any paper or anything that we can break out? I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay. So, did we want to get into groups? Yeah. All right. So, let's start over here. Ethnic studies poster. That'd be group one. Group two could be somewhere around here. Is there room in the back? And we could start talking about as many as at least four or five. I always think three is the best. Five is good. I always like odd numbers because you get to argue. Test, test. If we could sit down and then we're gonna sort of share out some of our findings. Did we get volunteers from the groups that are willing to share out? No? Any volunteers? Group group one with organizing, was there somebody that was gonna share out? Maybe group two? Whomever wants to go first? Is that mic on? Yeah? All right, group one, if you're willing to share out what you talked about and any goals, action plans that we have for the future. Oh, yeah, either or. Test, test.
Okay. So for group one, we were just coming up with some planning. Someone brought up in our group the idea of a general assembly so that multiple organizations can agree on plans of action and what's going on. Local orgs. Well, it's hard to read this backwards. That's okay. So for maybe go that way so they can see it because my body's here. Local orgs to develop curricula. We're talking about talking to the students to see if they can develop their own clubs that are going to be more uh, politically active in trying to get ethnic studies into the school boards, talking grassroots, talking eventually our freedom schools that we're doing with PBSD, um, education around bills. Teresa knew, yes, Christine knew someone that could do some education, so we're thinking do it either as a Zoom, talk about AB 101, I think, within our group, um, educating on AB 101. Oh, yeah, please have comments. And teaching the history. Um, and the other upcoming bills. And looking at targeting, classified, targeting union leaders, just reaching out to more people, um, working our freedom schools to get that information out there, uh, reaching out to Amamutsun and neighboring groups and other indigenous groups within that maybe are not having their voices represented, and can we all work together to have that come together. And then talking about Louis Alejo, I think it was just a conversation on power and politics. And then, then we came to look at parents. Can we get the kids to reach the parents by having like student centered presentations? So then the parents come out, they're like, oh, my kid is presenting, I'm proud. What else do the parents do? They help kids go to well, I,
This part is I think the idea that like ethnic studies, like parents like the idea that ethnic studies helps kids go to college, and so like feeding into that and just getting parents on board. Um,
and then yeah, we were just talking about the specific struggles in Santa Cruz. We all can see it's a racially segregated county. So working with what we've got, I think we were kind of advised like they're going to do what they're going to do. We just have to keep building, and they're going to have pushback, but we got to keep building. And I think it was a good conversation.
All right, maybe I can turn this up and see it better. So there are a lot of terms here, and I think we'll just kind of do our best to sort of name what they were as opposed to go too much detail. But in the conversation around curriculum development, parts of the conversation ended up talking around how students can learn empathy for each other and for different groups, and certainly the idea of solidarity came up. Students can see the effects of historical trauma and the impact of trauma, and we talked about some specific examples about how people engage or sort of give their stories, and then the trauma that sort of comes from that, and have that be acknowledged in the classroom setting. Student empowerment, spirituality, and student empowerment spiritually and mentally. So again, empowerment, and I think the term power and empowerment was a recurring theme that we wanted to return to a few times. Self-determination, liberation, independence, and decolonization all have their place in the development of an ethnic studies curriculum. Intersection of different groups, so intersectional identity and having that be named. You want to add, please?
Yeah. Yeah, because we had a lot of women in our group, so I want to have some representation. Um, Seeking justice, taking action, meeting community needs and collective care. And that also went along with student empowerment and community empowerment, because people were talking about a lot of times, one of the teachers was saying that a lot of times the power structure, the power systems do not get discussed. Challenging racial capitalist power. So they're the two sides of the coin, challenging the current power and then building collective care in the community, collective power. One struggle, many fronts, or international solidarity, or joint struggle. A lot of people are using the term joint struggle rather than solidarity, because solidarity is more like, well, I'll help out your movement, but you got to have a stake in it. Each group has to have their own stake in it, and it's a joint struggle that we're all engaged in. So again, we were talking about power and oppression and social community action justice. So the other thing about empathy and compassion was related to the humanization, was one of the tenets that was named.
I think one of the good things that was mentioned in our group was having the students going home and asking their family members about struggles and histories of where they came from. I think that was a good point that we mentioned that we didn't put up on that.
Oh, I'm gonna walk around with this because I don't like being on stage. I like doing work more. So really, real quick, I'm gonna add something that you said, Omar. One of after we read Sandra Cisneros' My Name, I do an interview, right? And one of the things is I ask students, like, do you know why you were named that way? Oh. And I mean, I've heard some wild. That's their homework assignment, right? And they go home and they ask the parents, why am I named the name that I have? Why am I who I am, right? Because we wrap ourselves around our name, right? And sometimes that name may not identify you, but at one time I thought I should change my name a long time ago. I decided I shouldn't, right? Because now I am Alfonso. Um, now, so that's one of the homework assignments. Another one I do is also after we read Follow the Corn. I think somebody mentioned the textbook here from Roxanne Tumba Ortiz is her first chapter that talks about corn, right? I and this is one of their favorite homework assignments is go home and have a tortilla. It could be a taco, it could be enchiladas, whatever it is, have a tortilla. Because yeah, that too. That would be amazing. See, I need more ethnic stories so we could have some great foods. And that was one of my favorite things about college is that we would have classes and people would bring in potlucks. So I mean, my classes are also wrapped around food, and my son and I were talking about how do we talk about culture, right? Food is a huge thing. Language is also a huge thing. But also, one of the things that I want to bring up that Vicky was talking about is ethnic studies is hard. Fighting for ethnic studies, doing the work that we do is very hard. But we also have to figure out how to have fun. And yes, we have fun doing some of the work, but I just got a text because my homeboy that was supposed to show up here with me and give the presentation. It's his birthday today. So we said happy birthday and everything. But our other friend said a video on pickleball rules. So once a week we get together at least, because that's the other thing that we need to start thinking about, because we do fight and go through a lot of trauma. I think that was one of the statements that was going on and we were talking about in group 2 was a lot about trauma. And in group 1 they were talking about there's a lot of sleepless nights and we're really tired. So we have to start thinking about how do we re-energize, right? And for me, I joked around that I really did not like being at my house. Like, even when my kids were young, I'd be like, hey, there's no school today. We're going somewhere, right? But after COVID, I realized my house is better than just my bed. I enjoy it. So, finding what you enjoy outside the struggle, if it connects, even better, right? Do it because it's hard. It's a lot of work. It's time consuming. I can tell you the last 30 years have gone by fast, right? And I know last night I had a great time with the Three Musketeers, or just two, just two. Sorry. Um, and I learned a lot, and there was a lot of stories that we heard that were about having a great time. So it's a struggle, but it's also a great time. If you need to email me, that's my email. Um, and I will always use hasta la victoria siempre because I am a Chicano. And Che, when I read his stories, woke something up in me, right? And I did share that I would walked into Mecha, but one of the things that I also walked into that day was the library. And one of my friends that was at the Mecha meeting showed me the two bookcases of Chicano literature and history. And I devoured all of that. So again, think about those kids that need it. Think about those kids that don't even know that they want it. And that's what we do. That's what we work for. And hasta la victoria siempre.